The smartest people you know are not the happiest ones. You have probably noticed this without knowing what to do with it. The person who reads everything, thinks carefully, sees through comfortable explanations. They are often also the ones who cannot sleep, who find ordinary pleasures insufficient, who carry a weight that people with less interior life do not seem to carry in the same way. This is not coincidence, and it is not a modern problem. Some of the most rigorous minds in the history of philosophy arrived independently at the same disturbing conclusion. Awareness has a price, not because intelligence causes depression in any clinical sense, but because the expansion of consciousness dismantles, one by one, the illusions that make ordinary life psychologically bearable. And once dismantled, those illusions cannot simply be rebuilt by deciding to believe in them again. Giacomo Leopardi mapped this more precisely than anyone before him. His argument has a name that understates its force: the theory of illusions. Civilization advances by destroying illusions. Every gain in genuine knowledge dismantles something that was making life psychologically bearable. Not mistakes, necessities. The belief in progress, in romantic love as permanent transformation, in personal destiny, in the permanence of what matters most. Reason removes them one by one. Knowledge increases. The capacity for undisturbed happiness decreases in direct proportion. He arrived at this from inside it, an extraordinary mind, in a body that deteriorated under the conditions of his obsessive study, in a library that gave him everything except a reason to think the reading would end well. Leopardi was not arguing that ignorance is preferable. He was arguing that the trade has a cost that almost nobody accounts for in advance. But if Leopardi explains why reason destroys the illusions that happiness depends on, he only describes the surface of the problem. The deeper structure was mapped by a philosopher who looked not at what intelligence removes, but at what it adds. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that consciousness does not simply perceive suffering, it expands it across dimensions that animals cannot access. An animal experiences pain in the immediate moment and nothing else. A human being experiences the same pain and also the memory of every previous pain, and the anticipation of future pain, and the imagination of pain that has not yet arrived and may never arrive. Intellect projects suffering across time in both directions simultaneously. The capacity that allows human beings to plan, to create, to build civilizations across generations is the same capacity that makes a single loss reverberate through years of memory and years of dread. And in the absence of active suffering, Schopenhauer identified something equally difficult to escape: boredom. Life oscillates between pain and boredom. When desire is unsatisfied, there is suffering. When desire is satisfied, the satisfaction lasts briefly before desire returns, or disappears into the particular emptiness of having nothing left to want. Greater intelligence intensifies both ends of the oscillation. Think about the last time you lost something that mattered. How long did it actually occupy you? Not the event itself, but the replay, the anticipation of the next version of it, the imagination of what could still go wrong. That extension across time is not weakness. It is the tax that consciousness charges for everything it allows you to build. Pascal arrived at a similar recognition from a different direction entirely. He noticed something about human behavior that had no satisfying explanation under the assumption that people were primarily rational. Human beings cannot sit quietly in a room alone, not for long, not voluntarily. They fill every available space with entertainment, work, ambition, conversation, politics, noise. Pascal's observation was that this compulsive filling is not the pursuit of pleasure. It is the avoidance of something specific. Silence forces confrontation with mortality, with the fact that the self is temporary and the universe indifferent to that fact. Divertissement, he called it. Diversion. The entire apparatus of busy modern life understood as a mechanism for not thinking about the thing that thinking leads to. The reflective mind cannot use the same escape routes. It sees the mechanism while it is running it, and seeing it makes it less effective, which means the silence it was designed to cover becomes more present, not less. Kierkegaard identified what that silence actually contains. Not fear. Fear has an object. You are afraid of something specific, which means the fear has a boundary. What the reflective mind produces is something without a boundary. Anxiety. The dread that arises not from any particular threat, but from the sheer weight of possibility itself. The more possibilities consciousness perceives, the more it understands that every choice eliminates infinite other choices, that freedom is not relief, but responsibility, that the self is the one thing it cannot escape from, and also the one thing it never fully understands. Greater awareness produces greater existential weight. The examined life is not the comfortable one. You have felt this, not as philosophy, as the specific exhaustion of being someone who cannot stop seeing the mechanism underneath things, including the mechanisms inside yourself. Cioran pushed this further than anyone was comfortable following. The Romanian philosopher who spent most of his life in Paris, writing in a language that was not his own, described lucidity as something close to pathological, not a gift, a condition. To see reality without the softening of illusion is not enlightenment, it is exhaustion. His recurring image was insomnia, a consciousness that cannot stop observing itself, that cannot achieve the blessed interruption of unreflective rest, that remains awake to its own mechanisms, even when wakefulness produces nothing useful. Cioran did not write about suffering from the outside. He wrote from inside it, with a precision that made the writing itself feel like evidence for the claim. At the outer edge of this tradition stands Camus, who looked at everything these thinkers had identified and refused both available exits. The universe does not answer our deepest questions. It does not confirm that our lives matter, that our suffering serves a purpose, that the values we construct have any support beyond our own insistence on them. This silence, encountered by a consciousness that cannot stop asking, is what Camus called the absurd, not a problem to be solved, a confrontation to be survived. He rejected the illusion, because the illusion requires looking away from what is actually there. He rejected despair, because despair surrenders to the silence rather than living in spite of it. What he proposed instead was revolt, not solving existence, not transcending it, continuing fully inside it, eyes open, without the comfort of an answer that was never going to arrive. The ones who pressed this far did not find a way back. What they left behind were maps, accurate, uncomfortable, and more useful than any map of easier ground.